Today my guest is Darrell Hawley. Darrell, how are you?
Good, Dave. Good to see you.
Darrell's an MVP in C#?
C# MVP.
C#, but you're also doing a lot of work in Python.
Yes, that's correct.
First, tell me about Python. What was your draw to Python? Why are you interested in that?
Well, it's a dynamic language, and I found, I've heard a lot of. It started from the Microsoft space, doing a lot of C#, and I started hearing about more about Python and like Ruby, and then all of a sudden there came this idea where we're going to have Iron Python.
Iron Python is Microsoft's implementation on the dynamic language runtime.
Right.
Of the implementation of Python.
Right, and there was a number of people that were kind of exploring some of these new languages around, but nobody was really looking at Iron Python. So it would just seem like a natural fit to go in and take a look and just understand what Iron Python was all about. And then I kind of got drawn in. I started understanding, hey, this really is, a cool language. It's compelling. There's a lot fewer noise characters. There's, this white space significance is not necessarily as dreadful as one, would be expected to believe, when first talking to other people.
Right.
In fact, it actually made I found the code was clearer.
White space meaning the indentations of lines actually mean something,
correct,
as opposed to just delimiting with curly braces, things like that.
Right.
And you're not just using Python; you're using a framework with Python right now. Was that right?
Right. Actually, and I'm using Django.
Django, DJ.
Yeah, it is DJANGO. Correct.
Like Django Reinhardt.
Django Reinhardt. In fact, when I go and I look up, when I'm looking for Django stuff, I keep finding this Django Reinhardt guy, and I had no clue who Django Reinhardt was.
Oh, he's awesome. He plays some of this stuff.
Okay, you're going to play with Django Reinhardt.
So what is Django the framework?
Django the framework is a web framework. In fact, maybe the best way to do it is most people know what Ruby on Rails is.
Okay, Ruby on Rails. I know what it is. But you tell me what it is.
Well, Ruby on Rails is the web framework for Ruby that has gotten a lot of press. It came through 37 Signals, who did things like Basecamp,
right.
And it made possible very rapid application development.
Yeah, and it's a model view controller framework.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And that's exactly what Django is, but it's for the Python world. And you can jump in, with very little code, you can have a website up and running. The nice thing about Django is there's, even though it's built to allow you to create things very rapidly, it's very easy to go in and maybe change the way that Django does things by default. So it allows you to put that feature out there and then have something, functionally it works.
Okay.
It might not look the way that I want it to. Then it allows you to say, okay, well, I'm going to go start tweaking that because that's what my client wants to see right now. They want to see some of the pop in the on the website.
The eye candy, yeah.
The eye candy, gotta have eye candy. So, anyways, it's and my experience thus far has been a very positive one.
So have you worked with Ruby on Rails before?
I have not.
How about the ASP.NET MVC?
I have not worked. I've toyed with it a little bit, but it has not been something that I've actually gone out and done a project.
All right. So this was new. This whole concept of the MVC model or pattern was something new to you when you got into Django.
Right.
Tell me about the challenge of picking that up.
I actually didn't find it. I've done enough reading about it where it seemed to be pretty natural. It's like, oh, I get it. This is what my controller's doing. And you go to the controller, and none of the definitions, the official definitions of the controller ever really made sense to me until I started seeing it. It's like, oh yeah, this is the one that does all the stuff.
Right.
This does the stuff. If it's gonna get the data, it's gonna display the form. It's gonna display.
That's the brains.
That's the brains. I get that. So, and it's interesting because Django does things, even though it is an MVC framework, the way they name things is a little weird. And what Django is calling a view is actually a controller. And I don't know, I'm not sure exactly why they did that, but they've actually named their pattern a model template controller pattern, but it's same concept.
It looks and quacks like a
yes,
pattern.
That's right, duck typing.
Yeah, if I could be a little this dynamic thing.
You do, you'll love it.
So that's interesting. So what about, you mentioned naming, is in the ASP.NET MVC framework, which is the one that I'm familiar with, naming is important. There's a lot of conventions. The way that you name your views, the way that you name your controllers and your methods, those are actually important in routing and other things. Is that true in Django?
It is important merely because it's going to make it more readable to the next program. It's not locking you in.
Okay.
If that's,
Okay,
what
that's
that's what you
different.
mean.
Well, what I mean they use something called convention over configuration.
Yeah.
It's a real common paradigm. And what that means is, rather than, you don't have to tell anyone which view to use, as long as you name your views a certain way.
Right, and I saw that because in the
Controllers a certain way, the framework just knows that it sees this pattern. It
Right.
says, customer controller. Then it knows to do the route to a controller named customer.
in MVC, it has to end with controller, correct?
So that's an example. It has to end with the word controller.
And then like views work, similar.
Views by default expects to be in a particular folder, and if you don't specify the name of the view, it'll look for a view with the same name of the controller class minus the word controller. Things like that are common in the MVC. I was wondering if there are patterns like that in Django that you come across.
They're there. They're
Okay.
there, and I guess it's not. It's really, like I say, it's more make it more readable. You can step outside.
Yep.
You can step outside of that framework
Yep.
or those conventions if you want. But again, you're making it much more difficult for the next guy that comes along and touches your code.
Okay. So let me ask you this. I'm mostly a .NET guy.
Mhm.
Is there any reason for me to explore Django? Or I'll be more broad, Python or Django? Is that
Oh, absolutely. In fact,
Why?
it really.
Why should I care?
Why should you care? Well, starting with Python, because you just have to very broad.
Yeah,
When I writing C#, all right. So I got good, and I thought I was writing. This is the way that C# should be written.
Yep.
Then you start reading, you start playing with a new language like Python. It's like, wow, I can do some like slightly different things here. As far as what's a good example? Duck typing. Really sort of, how do you translate, this idea, over into C#? And honestly, it's a little bit difficult, but it starts making you think about, okay, how am I going to do my, how am I going to do my master? Is there anything that I can learn? And I probably picked a poor example.
No,
because
Mux
it's
is a
not-
good example because that's something that goes through, jumps through some hoops in .NET in order to swap out a mock class for an actual class. And then there are whole frameworks built around just that piece of it. So with
Right.
duck typing, we don't need that because we swap out anything as long as it's
Right.
at runtime, because nothing's resolved until runtime.
In Python, when you create a mock, you really just like, you don't really even need a framework. You just take a class,
Okay.
and it's like, this class needs to have this method for this thing to work, and you just put that method in. It doesn't matter if you have all of iList implemented.
Okay.
You simply have whatever that one part of functionality that requires list,
Yep.
and then you have yourself a mock.
Yep. I heard it. So mocking is much more simple, and that's a push towards an argument for dynamic languages.
Yeah.
How about an argument towards, now this is from the .NET perspective, towards Django. I've got an MVC framework already built into .NET, not built in, but available to .NET, several MVC frameworks actually. Should I consider looking at Django?
Yeah, and this is why it's, I actually had this conversation with Josh Holmes
Smart
a couple
guy.
of nights ago. Very smart guy, and we were talking about the differences between ASP.NET and MVC and Django, and really I think that what came out of that is kind of a poor comparison, really, because what ASP.NET is offering you ultimate flexibility. The flexibility is what it does actually very well,
Okay.
even with the configuration. It is there's another framework in the Python world called TurboGears, and
Okay.
TurboGears actually mirrors very much what ASP.NET does.
The web forms.
The web form. Oh, not the web forms. I'm sorry. The MVC.
Oh.
In that it's an MVC template. You are responsible for creating the code every step of the way. So you pick your ORM, right? You have your templating languages already built in.
Yep.
Now you're structuring your code in a very standard fashion. Now if you go over to Django, the structure of the code is really sort of taken care of for you.
Okay, so a lot of
that's
decisions are
done,
for you.
right? The ORM is just built in. You just sort of you're essentially building these sort of imagine taking a SQL statement and kind of making a class out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is maybe the best way that I could explain it, and it just sort of builds that those tables for you and that model, and that you carry that forward through your code. It's which is there are these rails, so to speak, that you can fall off of, but it's not because it's not, you trade that speed for flexibility. I mean there is that price.
Okay.
So
Anything else you want to add about Django, about right now? How about Darrell Hawley?
Darrell Hawley.
Where can people find out more about you?
Oh, at DarrellHawley.com.
All right, that's your blog.
That's my blog.
You blogging about Django?
I don't have any blogs out there right now. Actually, the thing that I'm most interested, I mean, Django is, is important, but I think it's kind of secondary to just how do we write good software,
Okay.
and that's and just what is it, what is the project lifecycle look like. So
That
that's
sounds like a good other show.
it could be,
We'll talk.
and it's yeah, that's that. Well, another time.
All right, excellent. Well, thanks a lot. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dave. You know, when you're drowning in technology, it's really great to know that you have friends to rely on.